Grab your favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
Fantasy Freaks and Geeks, welcome to part 2 of the Week 8 episode of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. We got all the AFC home games to go through here for Week 8, and we are going to get started right off the bat here with my New York Jets going down to Jacksonville to play the Jaguars. Jets coming off of that absolutely putrid Monday night game in which Sam Darnold threw 4 interceptions and a lost fumble, 86 yards. It was pretty pathetic. Looking at this game, the running backs are definitely is the position group that has the best matchups. The Jaguars allow the 6th most receptions and receiving yards to running backs. Le'Veon Bell, that's his thing. That's his MO, catching passes out of the backfield. I think maybe after last week's performance, the Jets kind of try and get back to the basics here and take advantage of the talent that they have and what they do best. So the matchup couldn't be any better for a good Le'Veon Bell game. I think they try and get Crowder a little more involved as well. The thing that was really killing the Jets last week was the Patriots running that zero blitz. So to me, if the Jaguars are going to try and implement that and blitz them, they're going to have to go to those quick hot routes, and that's going to be Jamison Crowder. So I like him as well. If Chris Herndon is active, I think he's worth a play. Solely because of his talent and the rest of the team there. I think Sam Darnold is definitely missing him. So if Herndon is available, I'm willing to play him. Like I said, the running backs in this game have the best matchups. Leonard Fournette playing against this Jets defense that's allowing the 7th most fantasy points to running backs. Fournette with 4 straight games over 25 touches now. He's a rock solid RB1 despite the fact that he's only had that one lone touchdown so far this season. Since DJ Shark's huge 164-yard, 2-touchdown game in Week 5, in the past 2 games he's only caught 6 passes for under 100 yards total. Meanwhile, last game, D.D. Westbrook had a 9-target, 100-yard game with a touchdown. So these two guys are pretty inconsistent here, and it seems like it's been back and forth all season. I think Gardner Minshew is, he's going to bounce back a little bit, and I think these guys will play better, as a whole. But I just don't know how I can figure out which one it's going to be each week, so I'm staying away from both of them. The next game is the Raiders at the Texans. Josh Jacobs, he's got a tough matchup here. The Texans are pretty good against the run, despite them being horrible against the pass. They're giving up the 8th fewest fantasy points to running backs. So it's a tough one for Josh Jacobs, but 50 touches in the last 2 games. So that's the kind of guy you have to start. You got to keep him in your lineup every week. Starting running backs that get that kind of workload are not easy to find, so you keep them in your lineup for sure. Darren Waller is the other guy on this Raiders team that I'm definitely willing to play. He also has a tough matchup. Texans are allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. But again, the volume, it's all about the volume with these guys. Darren Waller's averaging over 8 targets a game. He's catching 88% of his targets. He got his first 2 touchdowns of the season last week, and Derek Carr loves throwing to this dude. He loved throwing to Jared Cook last year, and he's throwing to Darren Waller just as much. He's got a 36% target share so far this year. He's kind of a a PPR monster at this point. He is definitely a must-start at the tight end spot for sure. Deshaun Watson with the Texans, he's a must-play every week. Same thing with DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins kind of had a couple games there in the middle of the season where he wasn't getting the same workload that we've gotten accustomed to seeing him with, but 2 straight games now with 9 catches on 12 targets. Last week he had the 100-yard game and a touchdown. So with the Raiders being so bad against quarterbacks and wide receivers, giving up the 3rd and 2nd most fantasy points respectively to those two, I think this is going to be an awesome game for Watson and Hopkins, especially with Will Fuller being doubtful. I think they just funnel to DeAndre Hopkins this week, and I think he's going to do work. Like I said, Will Fuller's doubtful, so I think that opens the door up for Kenny Stills. You can get away with playing him in a flex for sure. Got this great matchup, 5 targets last week. I think we see another 100-yard game from him if Fuller is in fact out, and I love him for FanDuel because I'm sure he's pretty cheap as well. All right, next game, we got the Eagles playing against the Bills. Carson Wentz is a start solely because of his upside. He's got one of the toughest matchups for quarterbacks, and he hasn't really been playing all that well, but I think he's still worth playing over guys like Derek Carr and Gardner Minshew, the last 2 games that we went through. He's just, he's one of these younger quarterbacks that he makes plays, man. So I think he's got to he's staying up there in the top 12 quarterbacks, especially this week. There's just so many quarterbacks that are hurt, so many quarterbacks that aren't playing well, and it's kind of a strange thing going on right now with the quarterbacks in fantasy football, but I think he can get away with playing Carson Wentz. I'm sitting both of the Eagles running backs, however, and I'm sitting Alshon Jeffrey, really. The Bills are giving up the 2nd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, 5th fewest to quarterbacks. Their passing defense is just one of the best in the league. So match that with the fact that the Eagles' offense is really struggling right now. Honestly, I think Wentz and Ertz are really the only guys worth playing. Ertz is he's struggling. He's not playing as good as he was, and I think Dallas Goedert has really starting to eat into his opportunities a little bit. But the Eagles drafted Goddard with the intention of playing these 2 tight end sets that they've been playing a hell of a lot more of lately. They're getting the best out of it. It's just, unfortunately, right now it's not translating to the rest of the offense. I think once Deshaun Jackson gets back and Alshon Jeffrey is 100%, the Eagles' offense will look completely different, and I think that will eventually open things up for these running backs. But in the meantime, especially in this matchup, I'm only playing Carson Wentz and Zach Ertz. As far as the Bills go, this past game, the Eagles are the most generous as far as fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So I'm definitely playing John Brown with the fact that they traded Zane Jones. It's pretty much just him and Cole Beasley now, who is more of a 3rd down, chain-moving type of guy, whereas John Brown is the deep threat. He's got a 75% catch rate, which is pretty awesome for a dude who sees the amount of air yards that he does. His targets are always down the field, and for him to catch 75% of his targets is pretty damn good. Josh Allen, again, definitely a top 12 quarterback with his rushing ability. I mentioned it in part 1 of this week's episode, just how much added value you get from quarterbacks that can rush like that. The running backs in this game at least, I'm sitting both of the Bills as well. I need to see something from Devin Singletary before I feel comfortable putting him into my lineup, in a weekly basis. He's really only had that one game so far that was pretty good in the beginning of the season, and since then he's been dealing with injuries and hasn't been as involved as I'm sure the Bills were hoping he would be. But he'll get there eventually. He's a rookie. You got to take your lumps with those rookies. Next game here is the Buccaneers at the Titans. Titans bring this, they're at home with this awesome defense. Honestly, I think with the Buccaneers right now, the only guys you can play is Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Yes, it's a tough matchup, but in this Bruce Arians offense, you play these guys. They're both having pretty good years. I think Mike Evans is a little disappointing, considering I'm sure a lot of guys are drafting him as their number one wide receiver, but it's kind of been more of the Chris Godwin show so far this season down in Tampa Bay. And the running backs with the Buccaneers, it's still so up in the air, and this matchup's so tough. I'm staying away from both of them. With the Titans, man, this was surprising. Tannehill actually looked pretty well. He comes in relief. He gets the start last week, and he actually made this offense look like a real offense. Corey Davis and A.J. Brown both looked pretty good last week. Let's see, Corey Davis, 6 catches on 7 targets for 80 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown with 6 targets on 8 catches. 6 catches on 8 targets for 64 yards. So, we finally saw 2 legit-looking wide receivers. Derrick Henry was able to get 22 touches with, 90 yards and a touchdown. So it looked like a real offense for the first time all season with the Titans. I'm not getting excited about them. I think I'm going to wait another week or two to see, especially in this matchup, see how the Titans do, because the Bucs' run defense is really good. They allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to running backs. However, they're in the top 5 in fantasy points allowed to QBs, wide receivers, and tight ends. So if there's a game for this Titans passing offense to build upon what they did last week, it's this week, because the Buccaneers are going to load up to stop Derrick Henry, and I think Tannehill will have a good opportunity to put up some points against this Buccaneers secondary. So let's see how they do. Let's see how they do this week before we start saying that Corey Davis and A.J. Brown are legitimate flex options. So good luck to you, Tannehill, man. Maybe you can take this starting spot away from Mariota and give us a team where we don't have players just wasting away. Next, we got the Browns at the Patriots, and of course, the Patriots get another second-year quarterback. Continuing this ridiculously easy first half schedule for the Patriots. You just go back and look at the teams that they've played. Week 2 against Miami, they played 2 trash quarterbacks. Week 3 against the Jets, they played whoever the hell that third stringer was. Buffalo, they knocked out Josh Allen, and the backup quarterback came into that game. Week 5 against Washington. Whatever trash quarterback played then, the Giants in week 6, they get a rookie. And then last week in week 7, they got a second-year quarterback in Sam Darnold. And here in week 8, they get another one. So just ridiculous how a defending Super Bowl champion could have such an easy schedule. But that's how things work out for the Patriots. Seems like every year it's always it always works out in their way. But I think this Patriots defense is going to make Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield look bad. He's not going to look as bad as Sam Darnold looked last week, but I think this Patriots team will be rocking again. I hope the Browns spent their the extra time during the bye week, drawing up a whole bunch of trick plays and some new innovative plays, because if they don't go out there and show the Patriots defense stuff that they haven't seen yet, they're just going to get crushed again. I think you could still play Odell and Chubb because of the volume that they're going to get and the talent, but I'm definitely sitting Jarvis Landry for sure. For the Patriots, this is a great opportunity for them to slowly work in the newly traded for Mohamed Sanu. Browns' run D is absolutely terrible, so I think it's going to be a big game for the Patriots running game, especially James White. And this may be kind of a make it or break it game for Sonny Michel, who has really struggled this year. He's yet to have a 100-yard game, despite 4 of his 7 games with at least 19 touches. I think I saw Rex Burkhead is still questionable, but Brandon Baldwin has gotten so much more involved over the past few weeks. If they go out there and they're playing this Browns defense that's giving up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs, the 3rd most receptions to the position, also allowing the 8th most receiving yards to running backs. So Sonny Michel's really got to prove it this week, or I think he's very much at risk of losing his job to Rex Burkhead. Moving on to the next game, the Broncos at the Colts. So, big trade. Broncos traded away Emmanuel Sanders, which I think now puts Cortland Sutton as a must-start number 1 wide receiver. At least he's the number 1 wide receiver for the Broncos. He may end up being more of a wide receiver, too, for you in your fantasy league. But I think now the volume that he's going to get, he's got to stay in your lineup. Plus, this Colts defense is not what it was last year, so I think you're good with Sutton. These 2 running backs, though, they got tough matchups. The Colts versus running backs, they're the 7th hardest matchup for running backs. So it's going to be tough for these 2 dudes. When I was going through trying to finalize my top 24 running backs and my top 12 flex, I was really struggling between these 2 Bronco running backs and Sonny Michel, Carlos Hyde, Joe Mixon. But I think Royce Freeman is worth a start because of he's been a little more productive in the pass game, and he did end up converting his goal line carry last week. So maybe if we start seeing some more of those goal line carries, not be as much of a split and end up going a little bit more towards Royce Freeman because he is a bigger back. I think maybe Royce Freeman's worth playing just a tick higher than Philip Lindsay. But I think this game stays close enough that maybe Royce Freeman can stay involved and be able to get those 10 to 12 carries plus maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 targets. So I actually have him in a full PPR league, and I'm kind of stuck playing him. I don't really have an option. But for the Colts, despite this very difficult matchup against the Broncos defense that is among the fewest, they allow the fewest fantasy points to all quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends. Their pass defense is just awesome. I think Marlon Mack's workload, averaging 21.5 touches a game, you keep him. Again, he's one of these guys that you probably shouldn't take out of your lineup. And with T.Y. Hilton's involvement last week, 11 targets, he caught a touchdown. I think they're both borderline number 1/number 2 guys that you should just leave in your lineup no matter what. I know Zach Pascal had a great game last week. What did he do? He had 6 catches on 7 targets for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I think that was just a mirage. I think you can't get away with playing him against this Broncos pass defense. They're too good. All right, Packers at Chiefs. So Patrick Mahomes down with that knee injury. Matt Moore will most likely play, although Mahomes still has yet to be ruled out. It's Thursday night. I'm sitting here recording, and he's still not out technically for this game. I don't think this is a killer to Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. I think I kind of mentioned it earlier with what was that game I was previewing? Whatever it was. When these backup quarterbacks come in, it was Matt Schaub and Austin Hooper situation. I think this Matt Moore, Travis Kelce is very similar in that these backup quarterbacks come in, they know where to put the ball, and any veteran quarterback that has been playing with Travis Kelce knows that this dude is special, and I got to get him the ball. And it's really no easier target to hit than a huge tight end like Travis Kelce. That's a matchup problem everywhere on the field. So I think he's definitely still safe, and plus the Packers we saw last week just get gashed by the pair of tight ends for the Raiders. They now give up the 9th most fantasy points to the position. So Travis Kelce's definitely safe. Tyreek Hill, again, with quarterbacks, it's either you have the arm to get the ball downfield or you don't. With a guy like Tyreek Hill, elite speed, you just give him space to go run under the ball and catch it, and he will. So another guy that I'm not all that worried about with this quarterback change, especially in that offense. They're going to be just fine, I think. I think the one spot that does get hurt is the running backs. Also, I think Hardman and Robinson are kind of unstartable now with Tyreek back and with the quarterback change. But I still do like McCoy as an RB2. The Packers are giving up the fourth most fantasy points to running backs. That's definitely a weakness for them. And they're allowing the fifth most receptions to running backs. And so I think Andy Reid's been sitting back looking at that going, all right, well, this is going to be an easy way for me to get the ball to my running backs in the passing game. And that's something LaShawn McCoy's done well his whole career. So I like McCoy, but I think those are really the only three Chiefs that you can play in this game. As far as the Packers go, Aaron Rodgers kind of showed us all why last week why you got to play him every week. You can't sit him at all. What was it? 6 touchdowns. Five passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. It was ridiculous. These Packer running backs, though, are the ones that have the matchup of this week. The Chiefs have just been absolutely destroyed by running backs so far this season. Real quick, I'm going to go through Jacksonville in Week 1, 94 total yards to Leonard Fournette. Week 2 against Oakland, Josh Jacobs with 99 yards. Week 3 in Baltimore, they allowed Mark Ingram to put up 130 total yards and 3 touchdowns. Week 4, Kerryon Johnson, 150 total yards. Week 5 in Indianapolis, Marlon Mack had 148 total yards. Week 6 against Carlos Hyde, a touchdown and another 130 total yards. Last week, Week 7, Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman combined for 100 yards and a touchdown. So the Chiefs get beat by running backs. Play both of these guys. Both of these Packers running backs should have a pretty good game, and they should be used a lot. It seems like Devontae Adams isn't going to play again. If you want to try and figure out which one of these 4 wide receiver 2s for the Packers is the guy that's got the best chance, go ahead. It's probably MVS, but him and Geronimo Allison, Alan Lazard, this guy Jake Camaro, you just don't know where Aaron Rodgers is going to throw the ball. If you're open, he's going to hit you. So, and all 4 of them have shown glimpses of being a reliable second wide receiver on this team, but they've all just been so inconsistent. MVS I think he had 100 what did he have? Let's see, 133 yards last week on 2 catches. So it's kind of boom or bust with these guys, but I think they're great cheap FanDuel plays for sure. But I don't know if I'd be running out to the waiver wire to pick any of them up to play them this week. I have Devontae Adams in one of my leagues, and I've been kind of going back and forth, but I've been picking the wrong Packers second wide receiver every week that Devontae Adams has been out. So it's been frustrating for sure, which is why I'm just kind of staying away from him. And the last game here for Week 8, which should be a pretty easy one, Dolphins at the Steelers. Really the only Dolphin I considered playing is possibly Mike Gesicki. 11 targets in the last 2 games. He's had his yards per target slowly increase all year, week by week. And he also has a great matchup. The Steelers allow the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. So maybe it's something that the Dolphins try and exploit. Over the past week now, we've had 4 or 5 pretty significant trades go down, and in a league this morning, I actually saw that Kenyon Drake was dropped, so I picked him up just praying that the Lions go out and try and trade for him, or maybe the Eagles, one of these teams that could really use a running back. So Yeah, I mean, if you're really hurting at tight end, you're looking for somebody. I think Mike Gesicki could be a nice little flyer, maybe a good cheap DFS play as well. For the Steelers, James Conner, season high 16 carries and 23 total touches in Week 6 before the bye. Jalen Samuels is still likely out for this game, so James Conner, I think he's a top 3 running back this week. The Dolphins give up the second most fantasy points to running backs, so he's got a great matchup for sure. And Juju, who we drafted as a wide receiver 1, but has fallen to a wide receiver 2 spot, with the Steelers quarterback situations and everything going on down there. So, but yeah, I'm definitely playing Juju. He's got a great matchup as well. Dolphins ranked 6th against as far as fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. And with Mason Rudolph returning from concussion protocol, I think Juju has a pretty solid hold on one of those wide receiver 2 spots. So safe to say that the Steelers should be okay this week against this horrible Dolphins defense. So that's going to do it here for Week 8 of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry for last week. It's just been a crazy couple weeks for me here. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check out next week. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.